Hi, welcome back to Soul Speak. I'm Meg Michaelson. In today's podcast, we're going to talk about what does it mean to live with purpose? Because oftentimes we feel it has to be a big lofty goal or save the world or create a really cool device. However, maybe there's a simpler meaning. Thank you for joining me. So welcome back to Soul Speak. Thank you again for being here, for sharing, for liking, for rating. Today I want to talk about what does it mean to live with purpose? Oftentimes we can be so overwhelmed by, I don't know what my purpose is. And then we don't do anything because we're waiting for that big lightning bolt to strike us on the top of the head. And now we know what we're going to do. We've tied it into a living perhaps, or a career, or however, it's so much more than that. And it doesn't have to be so big. Can be, but it doesn't have to be. And it can change over time. Today, I'm so grateful and pleased to bring in a dear friend of mine, Susie Steiner. Susie is a writer, a mom, a blogger, an amazing creative, and as I said, a dear friend. And she has really found value in everyday living, purpose, in multitude of ways. So I thought she would be the perfect person to bring on today's podcast. Welcome, Susie, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Meg. I'm so excited. When you first started talking about this podcast a while back, I thought it was a great idea to share your insights, and I'm honored to be on it with you today.
Thank you so much. And Susie and I happened to have a day together. I don't know, maybe it was last week, and we hadn't seen each other for a while, but she's one of my friends that we can just pick up and doesn't feel like we ever had any space between us. So it's quite a gift. So I was looking online for what does it mean to live with purpose? Because like I said earlier, it can be a big, big deal to people. And on an astrological level, it's in that 10th house, the highest potential house, which could mean it's just a healing of a relationship in this lifetime. But of course, we have more than one purpose. So some of the definitions I found, in essence, it means that you know what you're doing. You have goals and are passionate about what you do. Instead of simply letting the days pass you by, you work with purpose to make the most from each day. Living with a purpose has a couple of big advantages. Living with purpose means being aware of your goals, passions, and values, and working to make the most of each day, prioritizing what matters to you, taking action towards those priorities. And what I have found is people who live with purpose, truly, the people that live more of a purpose-driven life have more energy. They feel as if they can accomplish more. That doesn't mean we want to stay busy because we live with purpose. Maybe the purpose is to find balance in everyday living. It's different for everybody. So Susie, as you look back at your life, what do you feel like, because you really have had a journey, and when you look back through your years and where you are now, what does living with purpose mean to you?
When you said it at first, I think I felt pressure right away. That I think there's this idea to, live with purpose and that there's pressure with that. But after I kind of sat with it for a while and reflected, it became really clear to me that, it wasn't until I'd had my fourth child, Birdie, was born. And I actually, I think I didn't know it at the time, but I experienced some postpartum depression. And that led me to some new friendships and conversations. And what with you were a part of that, Meg. And there became this new space in my life to seek out therapy. And I had never been to therapy. And it was through therapy and conversations with dear friends that I realized I had been living a life of obligation and expectation, and that I had more choices in life and that I hadn't really ever seen before. I was kind of in the momentum of life. I did what was expected. I went to school, I went to college, I got married, I had kids. Like it was all, the momentum of life. And I'm very grateful for all of it. It wasn't bad in any way, but I just lacked some awareness of the opportunities of purpose and choice. And I think they really go hand in hand.
As you recognized that difference and started making different choices and started seeing things a little clearer, Did you notice what happened to your mind or your intention and how that connected to your physical body?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I started to feel so much better, just more aware, and my relationships improved. I mean, especially with my husband. We went to therapy together, Jason and I, and that was so important. And as we both became more aware of the choices we were making, we both felt better, physically felt better, and then we had more direction with our life, and we started making choices together that were more meaningful. And it changed the direction of our life for sure.
That being said, when you look at purpose and how that shifted in you because you lived with more intention, what are some things that came out of that? What are some things that you decided to do that you hadn't been doing before? And that can be everyday living and then also some of the creative projects.
Right. I mean, the main thing that came first, I would say, was some daily habits that I'd never really had before, which include journaling and meditating. Those, I would say, are the foundation of what gives me the ability to live with purpose each day. By taking the time to journal and meditate, I always say most days because I think every day is too much pressure. But most days I meditate and I also journal, and that provides me the foundation to go out throughout my day with intention and with awareness. So that would be the daily habits. And then, it was just figuring out ways to slow life down a little bit. That would be the other big life change that happened as created this awareness, is to slow down and make decisions, to actually look at my calendar before I agreed to stuff. I mean, something as simple as that, I was never good at before. I would always want to give people an answer on the fly and not think about my time. I'd make it work. And just little things like that of slowing down, not answering, an invitation right away and just taking a minute, checking in with Jason, making a decision together. Those are probably the significant daily life habits that changed as I became more purposeful in my choices.
And when you look at that, like for instance, an example where you would consult your calendar before you say yes and consult Jason before you say yes, what's the purpose behind that?
I started to say no because, oh, Meg, we talked about this so much. I was one of those people pleasers that wanted to say yes to everything, which I read something recently about that. I always thought being like, oh, I'm a people pleaser, it made me sound like such a nice person, but it's actually kind of narcissistic. I realize now that you think that you need to like do everything because you're so great and so important and you add so much to whatever's happening. And that was definitely to slow that down and start to say no and to really choose how I spent my time. That's been the most significant for sure.
I love that. And actually, one of my kids said to me one time when she was mad at me, "You're just a narcissistic giver." And I'd never heard the term. And then I had to look it up. A narcissist. I'm giving to others to make myself feel good. I'm like, sometimes there is actually truth in that.
I
Right.
mean, it
And
happens.
so
Great.
that's
Do that for sure.
absolutely. And that's part of that. There is a scale of narcissism. And we say that word so much, but it is true. When we are pleasers, it's so important to step back and like you did and say, wait, what's the intention here? What is the intention? Is it so everyone keeps liking me?
Right. Right.
Or is
That
it
was my
so,
motivation. Yeah. That was,
yeah,
I just wanted to be well liked. Um, and I had to kind of take some time and figure out who I was instead of worrying about being so well liked. Like I had to, hit the pause on worrying about being so liked and really think about who I wanted to be. And once I became more clear with that, then it didn't matter if I was as liked because it was like, well, I know who I am now. It took a long time. I hope my kids are learning who they are a bit younger because it took me, I would say, well, into my 30s, maybe even 40s to finally figure out who I was. And then decisions became aligned with that instead of making my decisions based upon other people.
that beautiful third chakra. The third chakra is that center of our being that's our self esteem. And when we are handing it over to everybody else all the time, so we feel better about ourselves, yeah, we are defeated or deflated or exhausted. And when we start to say, wait a minute, who am I in this? Our energy increases and we like ourselves more because we're not handing our cup out there all the time to get filled, which is
Right.
so beautiful.
We have so much more clarity then. Like once I became more clear, then harder decisions became easier. Like everything became easier.
Everything became easier. And it doesn't always mean that we don't still have a little bit of the twinges of people pleasing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that the life skill now of being able to hit pause is really what helps me the most to bring awareness so that at least I can know before I go down that path again, or I can choose not to. And sometimes I still do, but yeah, it's just not. It's slowing down the momentum of life. I think has been the biggest thing for me. And that busyness you mentioned before, I loved being busy because again, it made me feel important. And now I just crave like a day in my calendar that there's nothing, and I like keep it that way. And I'm intentional of making sure I have a day where there's nothing, so that I don't just fill the calendar because I was really good at filling it.
Lovely. And I want to step back to when you said about children, because I really want our listeners to hear this. We, even though we didn't teach our children when they were first born or even the first 20 years of our children's lives, as we shift and become a healthier being, it always makes an impact. And you did it before your kids left the house. So they watched, they learned. We do make an impact when we are shifting into a healthier pattern, which
But
is
I think
just
the
beautiful.
biggest impact is by example for sure. I could tell my kids, to be readers all day long, but I've gotten over that, and I just read a lot, and I hope eventually. And now my oldest does read more for leisure, and I'm like, okay, finally. But yeah, I do think that you're right that it's an impact that we don't always see, but I think sometimes it shows up later. But my biggest thing for my kids, and I do say this a lot, that they're probably tired of hearing it, is to be able to hit the pause button. I mean, in their social circumstances, I mean, their lives are so fast paced and there's so much social demands on them. And I just try to have them slow down and just take a minute before they do something. And I mean, I think it kind of resonates with them, but it's really hard to do in this fast paced world we live in.
It is because we're an action-packed society. And and that's where, as you said, when you started to go to therapy, and even in a therapy session, if we're not talking the whole time, we're hitting a pause. And we can hit the pause. And once we hit the pause, we can connect to, wait, what do I want? What do I value? What is my belief? And then we can connect to our purpose.
Right, which can be like done through therapy, through walks in nature, through going to church. Like, I just think it's whatever way works for that person, but it is just finding a way where you can slow down and hear that inner voice again instead of the voices of everybody else. That I think the issue of purpose with our kids is kind of an interesting thing too, because I do think that they hear that idea, like you've got to pick a career that's, aligned with who you are and is meaningful and all that stuff. And I think there's a lot of pressure with that too. Like, and so it is finding that way to make purpose not feel like pressure though, for the kids especially.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's that big pressure where we feel like it has to be something big. And and yet we evolve. I don't know how old Steve Jobs was when he truly started Apple. He certainly wasn't 20. And that we evolve, and that evolution, when I started my line of work now, I was 38 years old. I didn't know I wanted to do this when I was younger. So it's to take that pressure off and let people know, as we connect to a purpose every day, and we'll talk about that, it's easier then to understand, wow, why am I here on earth? Why am I here on earth?
What's interesting too, though, with that is I always wanted to be a writer, but then I listened to everybody else and didn't think that that was really reasonable or realistic. And so then I wasn't a writer for 20 years. And now I'm just so grateful to go back to it. But it was because I was listening to everybody else instead of myself.
So before you were a writer, what were you?
Oh my gosh, Meg, should I go through the whole list? This is like, I started my career by chance as a temp, right out of college. I had a history and sociology major, which meant nothing. I mean, as far as a career, it was just classes I liked in college. And so I've, definitely taught my kids to not do that. If they're going to go to college, they should kind of know more what they want to do and take classes with more intention and purpose. But then I was a project manager in the technology industry for like 5 years, and was not related to who I was or anything, but I was a communicator and I love people, so it was a good fit for that time. And then I became a stay-at-home mom for many years, but always doing something on the side because I always felt this need to have balance with being a stay-at-home mom. So I mean, I did everything from working at an antique store to you were a part of the art center and a grocery store, a bookstore. So I always was dabbling and had a little side thing that gave me balance. And I was glad I did that. I do think that's really hard to be a stay at home mom.
And all of that time, without even knowing it, Susie, you had purpose.
Oh, right, right. But I was very unaware of it.
Absolutely. And yet you did, because there was that creative spark that you wanted to start the grocery store so you could bring healthier options to people. Now, when you look at your journey, there was always purpose. It's just we weren't necessarily tuning into what that even meant.
Right. Because I didn't think like I had the luxury maybe to think of it like that. I think I felt like there was other things that were pushing me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there is purpose in it for sure.
In everything, right? And even in motherhood, there's so much purpose. So when you were a stay-home mom, you had your beautiful creative and entrepreneurial life always going on because you carry such entrepreneurial spirit. When you had that, what was your purpose when you became a mom, or as you started to evolve into motherhood?
Well, I just wanted to instill in my kids this, unconditional love. And just that was, I mean, just being a good mom was my purpose. Like, and it was hard when they were little. I got overwhelmed and I would snap and be not the best mom. And it was really through this awareness of purpose and intention and how I wanted to live and therapy and meditation that made me such a better mom. Because it also helped me slow down. But I mean, Sierra, I do feel bad because she didn't get the best always, but I mean,
She's the
that's what
oldest. The oldest always gets the worst.
I know. But I think she appreciates it now. That
Yeah, and there was a lot of good in that too.
yeah, there
And
was.
and I love that because you just said what my next question was going to be. Beautiful. When we have that energy of I'm just moving through and doing this and doing that and going here and going there and I'm trying to be the best mom, and yet I'm not connecting to my inner world. I'm
Yeah, it
not
was just
connecting with me enough. So as you really moved into the pause, which led you to really get back to your writing, which is your purpose and one of your purposes, that changed not only your view of the world, but it really diminished your everyday stressors, or at least how you reacted to them, right?
absolutely. I mean, before that, it was just chaos. Like it was just chaos, just keeping up with the chaos. And once I was able to kind of take a minute and be like, wait a minute, I don't want to live this like chaotic, just busy, busy, busy life. Like this can't. There's got to be a better way. But I mean, it definitely was through friendships and therapy that I was able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said earlier, that improved your relationship with Jason, your husband. Through this journey, watching you become more calm and intentional and mindful, has that helped him in that same capacity?
Absolutely. I mean, he doesn't buy into all of my life habits of journaling and meditating. Every now and then, I'll get him to sit down and do some breath work with me, which he's very open to it all. But he has his own ways of slowing down his life, and a lot of that is, being outside, connecting to nature and sports. Those are his way to, for him to relax. So that's why it's so individual, but he's always been very respectful and supportive of my journey, and he's always game for conversation about it. But we definitely have different ways of hitting pause in our lives, but it still
How did
works.
how did your conversations change? By that I mean, when you go back and look at how you were conversing and now how the two of you have a different way of communicating, what shifted with that?
Oh my gosh, it's the best thing that shifted, and thank goodness. But it's most simply, as I think of it, the simplest way to put it is instead of like feeling like we were always in competition, like of who was right or who was doing the right thing, there was this competition. Like that went away and we became each other's cheerleader. And I wish I could say exactly. I mean, I think it just sort of happened in marriage therapy and just spending more time talking, doing different exercises, learning our love languages, doing all of those things, that we did at that time to really put effort into our marriage, because all of a sudden we had 4 kids and we were, grown-ups trying to live, not the teenagers that had fallen in love. And we had to kind of reassess. And it was a shift from competition to being each other's cheerleaders that really changed our relationship. And we started to realize that we had to be on each other's team for this to work. Like it wasn't going to be fun otherwise. If we were just always, adversaries. So but I don't know what exactly, I can't pinpoint one thing, but that's how I would best describe the shift.
And I want to stretch that a little bit because so many married couples, one of them ends up in resentment. If the other person is living more purpose, whether that purpose is their career or getting their body in shape or hanging out with friends, and the other person isn't, that one partner creates a lot of resentment within. And when two people both start to say, wait a minute, what do I want? What do I need? It really does help the relationship because it alleviates the resentment, which is leading to the competition. That tit for tat, because we want to make the other person wrong because we're not happy.
Right. Right. I do think it is doing those things to find your own happiness too, like to not be dependent upon the relationship for happiness. Like that was part of the shift too. That we each cultivated our own, we gave each other space to do our own things, to find our own happiness and our own, I don't, but then we were able to come together and share it too.
Someone I was working with a while ago was talking about when we're moving up the chakra system. So, age 0 to 7, we really believe in whatever our family wants us to believe, that primary tribe. And then we get to the third chakra, and that's after age 14. And we really start to grasp our own belief system, our own value system. And like Susie said earlier, when we are putting our cup out there to have it filled, we're not living our own value system. And the more we do that, the more we are disconnected from ourselves, the less happy we are. So that purpose-driven life is really that intention of living connected to self. What does Susie want?
Which is really hard if that like happens around age 14, which I think is totally accurate from what I've seen with my kids and my experience too. I think it's a very young age to try to figure, to realize that what an important connection that is to listen to your inner voice. I mean, I wish they taught that in school. Like, just, and that's where I try so hard to get my kids to journal, because I think journaling is such a simple way to cultivate that connection to your inner voice. But they haven't quite bought into that yet. But
Yeah. Or songwriting, or, there's so many ways to connect. And when we do that, we're quelling all that external noise. Years and years and years ago, when my ex-husband and I were first married to stay home, I ran a daycare center in my house. And one of the kids, he was probably 8 or 9, that was coming to my house, it was summer. The mom recognized his need to really go after what was important to him. And so she'd always send him with a clock to take apart. And he could take the clock apart and put it back together or not. But that meant something to him. Why? Because that was something that was driving him, a passion. And how many times do we not allow our kids to do that? We put them on a track because we were put on a track, and no fault of our parents. It's just the way life can be. But when we step back and watch our kids instead of direct our kids, starting after age 7, and certainly hopefully before 14, where you really can start to witness, wow, they like to dig in the dirt. Am I allowing that? Whatever that is, because when we let them have that, it's easier for them to live a purpose driven life and to not become so much about what others want for us, which gets us so confused. It gets us really confused when we live for others and not ourselves. And that's not selfish to live for self. You have more energy than to give to others.
Isn't, don't you think it's interesting though, Meg? Like, I do feel like two of my kids have always just had a clear sense of self. Like, and then the other two just are, I would say, tend to be, more people pleasers. And they have other things in common too. And I just think it's so interesting. Like, how does that happen exactly? They were raised in the same house, the same parents, but yet two of the kids really have always had this very clear sense. Almost to the point when they were really little, I had like no way to like discipline them because they didn't care. Like they did what they wanted to do and they didn't care. And yeah, and they've maintained that. I mean, they've definitely maintained that. And it's the challenge for me is to cultivate in the other two that don't have it quite as clearly projected. Maybe they may have it as much, but it's just not as clearly projected.
And give them space to figure it out, because they may not till later. However, these little steps, and I love that thought, that how come, or the question, how come some kids do and some kids don't? So important. This is where astrology comes in. So important to look at the birth chart, because if someone has a water sign, they're going to be more empathic, or an air sign. My daughter Grace is a double air, and she's picking up everybody's stuff all the time. And so that's, who are they? If it's an earth sign, they're going to sometimes be a stronger. But of course, it's not just looking in the Sunday paper, wherever the astrology is now. It's really getting a birth chart
Yeah,
and
it's
looking.
into it. Yeah, I did the love cards with all of them, but I could. It would be fun to revisit a little bit deeper with their astrological charts for sure.
Yeah, because then you can understand. And it's great that some kids know. There are some kids that know when they're young what they're going to do, and they're on that path. And that's okay. They come in with whatever that thing is, and then it might shift over time. I started doing Word of the Year a long time ago, and I think we were probably in that
Yeah,
same time
we did it
frame, weren't
together.
we?
Yeah, we
Yeah,
did
we
it
did that together.
together.
And I loved that Word of the Year. And that, I don't even know how many years ago, that was at least 12 for sure. And how is that played in? Do you still look at Word of the Year or the concept of the year?
I haven't as much recently. It's something I should probably revisit because I did like that as just a point of reflection. It was a great point of reflection and intention. Um, and I think, I did it for many years. Now, I don't think I did it this year, probably because I was out here and life was really different. Um, but I do appreciate that idea. I think, though, for me, I haven't. There was a community with that. It was a group of women that we got together and it was something we did together. And that was a really big part of it for me too. So that might be something I have to revisit for next year, is having that community of women to be intentional with again. Cause that was a big part of it.
Yeah. And I started doing that with my kids. I think one of my kids sent out, what's 9 things you want to do this year? Bucket list things. And we promoted that. And those things, when we are allowing ourselves to even look at our wishes, that helps us become more connected to our purpose, or purposes, whatever that means.
Right. And that's really what my journal has become, is a place, to think about those wishes and to reassess and to reflect back. Am I living as I want to? And it really holds me accountable too.
And that brings me to the next piece, which is that daily living. Because when we don't know if we think we have a purpose, but we don't know what it is, or we feel a little lost, we can start by those daily things. We can shift to looking at, what is my goal or my purpose today? Maybe it's, I'll drink more water. When you look at your daily living habits, how has living with more intention or connecting to a more purpose driven life, how has that impacted your daily living. Like an example, like some mornings I wake up and I'm like, oh, what do I have to do today? How much do I have to do? And then I will look at my dogs and feel so much love for my dogs intentionally. And I'm like, okay, good to go. And now my purpose is, because my word of the year is love. So then I'm back to love or whatever it is. So how do you tie that when you just got to that place where you started to live with more intention and purpose? How do you tie that into everyday living?
I mean, for me, it's that those morning habits for sure. It's the morning habits of, I have a cup of green juice, and then I have, my time to journal and meditate. And then it's really through meditation that, the way I end the meditation is often with a specific intention for the day of how I want to live that day. But then what I've recently started doing is also ending the day with a little bit more intention. I never used to do that. I used to, just be so tired that I would just, go to bed. And now I'm being a little bit more intentional with taking a minute at the end of the day. Not, I don't journal again or meditate specifically, but it's just like taking a moment just to kind of reflect on the day. I've really brought awareness to more how I begin and end my day. And, trying to look at the sun or the moon. That's been a big part of it for me too. Taking that minute outside, before I go to bed or something, and just looking at the stars, looking at the moon. I didn't howl at the moon, Meg. I'm sorry. I'll try that at the next full moon. But I did see the moon, and I did jump in the lake in the moonlight, so that was fun. But yeah, but it is those little things though too of what you mentioned, like looking at your dogs and then setting that intention of love. I mean, today I was really tired when I woke up, and at the end of my meditation, I was like, I'm just going to be extra kind, like to people I interact with at the store. And I just wanted to, and it's amazing how much people respond to you. But like, I just slow, I just made an extra thank you. I just looked somebody in the eye and said, thanks so much for your help, and just littlest things. But, sometimes we forget those littlest things. And
And that changes the world. Those small purposes, and it's really not small, but that's what changes the world, because when you were kind to one person, maybe they were having a bad day and they reacted perhaps with kindness to the next person.
right, the ripple effect.
That
Let's do
ripple effect. So your purpose that day was to really be and live in more kindness.
right, because I knew I was kind of tired. We'd had a long day of travel yesterday, so I knew I was running a little bit tired, and so I really during meditation was like, okay, I've got to shift this energy. I've got to shift the annoyance I have of having to run a lot of errands today, and just do all that stuff and just find a way for it to be better. And I just thought, well, if I'm extra nice, let's see how that goes then.
Yeah. And that's purpose.
And it made the day way more fun.
Absolutely. And that's how having an intention, having a purpose, one day, 1 hour, whatever it is, it shifts our energy in our whole body and it aligns us much more directly with our higher self, our higher power.
But I really think like a morning practice is key to make it happen. Because if we just, start out the day and then we're just in the day, it's like really hard to bring awareness to that, I think. At least for me, it is. I definitely need to start the morning a little bit slower and mindfully, which, often means setting the alarm a little bit earlier than I want to get up just to have that 20 minutes or whatever it is.
Yeah. And you're a journaler. And so for me, my morning practice is I get up, I drink my water, I let my dogs out, I make a cup of coffee, and then I go back in my bed and I have my first cup of coffee in my bed, and then I am ready to meditate. And then I stretch. And not every morning, because some mornings I did, like you said, it didn't wake up early enough. But it's that piece of what other morning practices, because not everyone, some people love journaling, and I journal sometimes, but not as regularly as you. Let's bring up some other ideas for people too, because there are so many ways to start with a morning practice.
For a while, I was putting like my feet on the grass every morning, like my bare feet, just as a little grounding exercise. And I should still do it. I did enjoy that a lot and thought it was a good thing. Like, and that's kind of quick. All you have to do is, go outside barefoot for a couple of minutes, but I think it really does ground you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I used to stand, and I do this still sometimes, stand outside and face the sun. Even if the sun wasn't out, I faced the east, and that's how I'd start my day.
I think that's big. Well, and there's science to prove it that even if I mean, there's science that's, I don't know who, I think it was Huberman, that neuroscientist that has made a big deal about starting your day with looking to the sun, that it does stuff to your sleep cycle and your whole body's
Your
systems.
neurotransmitters. Hmm. And just to have an intention to start the day with whatever that intention is leads to that next piece. And that can be, some people get up and they meditate, some people get up and journal, some people get up and stretch, but to have a morning practice or light a candle
Yeah.
or greet
Say
your
a prayer,
family with a smile.
right? It can be, I think that's the key, is just taking the time to figure out what really resonates with each person and trying different things. And maybe it's just, you do it for 14 days, 30 days, whatever, these little goals, and then see how you feel at the end of it, if it's something.
When you get to that point where you start doing it rote, where you're not connected anymore, then it's time to try something different or
Right,
reconnect with mindfulness because
right.
it's
And
important to be connected.
for
So
sure.
when you look back at your journey and you knew years ago you were a writer and then you didn't feel qualified or valid or good enough and you let it go, tell me how that came back to you. How did writing first come back again?
I think it was just through the blog. I started that blog, and that gave me, I mean, certainly journaling, and I read the book The Artist's Way. So that was kind of starting me back on the path, I would say. I love that book. I highly recommend it. Um, but then it was, finding this, that I could write a blog and I could, just create this space to write things that were, I don't know, that inspired me to take a minute to write about and to put it out there and not really worry about who saw it. It's just a blog, it's not, I mean, then I got more confidence with it. I did start to promote it. And now I have to say I've pulled back from it. So, it's a journey, but that's because I've been working on the novel, and it is a journey about what you want to share on social media, and all that stuff can be hard. With the blog, I was always so worried about it not being boastful. I just wanted it to be sharing my experience and never giving, because I would share health tips or things I was trying along the way. And I never wanted to come across like I had it figured out, because I don't. Like, it's so far from figured out. But even when you share like a health tip of celery juice, you don't, I was just sharing something that I was, doing, and it worked for me. And but the blog definitely gave me space to stretch my creative writing again. And I really enjoyed it. And I still enjoy it, though I've hit pause on it at the moment.
You're a beautiful connector. You connect people, you connect ideas, you get excited about things. So when you started the blog, it was really, as you said, your purpose was to share the things that you found of value.
Yes, a lot of it was Young Living Oils. I remember one of my early blog posts was Love Potion, which I still make, and I still think it's the best smell. And I mean, I'm glad to have that. And it also became sort of like a scrapbook. Like, I included some of our travels, for our family, and the kids love that they can look back at some of the posts as they've become older posts now. So I do have to keep finding my way with it, but every now and then I do need to take a break. I like it not being like there's no deadlines with it.
And yet you're still writing. You wrote a poetry book.
Yes, inviting pause with Debbie. Debbie was a photographer, and I wrote meditative poems.
Meditative poems.
Most recently, I've been working on this novel for like the last 5 years.
Yeah. And will you tell us about that? Tell us how that started and what that journey is like. Because when we have a purpose, and your purpose is to write this novel and complete it, not ignoring the rest of the purposes in your life, but doing that one too. When you look back, how did that begin? But this is important because doing something that we feel is a bigger project is sometimes frustrating and sometimes we want to give up, but you've kept at it. So will you talk about that journey?
I'd love to. I mean, it's it's kind of funny because it started with my kids in ski racing, and um, I thought, there were some parents that were so into it, and I was kind of making fun of one of them and said, I'm going to write a TV show about ski dads because you guys are so crazy. And the particular ski dad challenged me. He's like, you should do it. You should do it. And he didn't take it as like the kind of jab I meant it as. He took it as like, yeah, do it, Susie. That'd be great. And that's actually what started it all. And I did start it out as a TV show. It was a TV pilot. I researched how to write a TV pilot, which was really interesting. And I submitted it to a bunch of contests because that's one of the ways to, try to get your work out there. And in the Chicago screenplay, I won third place. And the feedback was to turn it into a novel, that it was such a unique sport that, isn't that well known, that it needed more context and it should be a novel. And so from that, I was like, okay, I guess I've always wanted to write my book. Let's do it. And but the story has evolved a lot. It's no longer really about ski dads. It's really about a ski mom that loses her way, that loses her purpose, and how easy life can kind of fall apart without intention. So it's actually so relevant to our conversation today because that's really what the book is about.
Even as that is a purpose of yours, and it's a purpose to publish it and get it out there, so you continue to have that oomph, because when we want to complete something, we got to get the driver going and we have to get the oomph. So when you're feeling that sometimes it's like, do I really want to do this today? Having a purpose is important. And then putting fuel behind it is important. So when you're feeling like you don't have fuel, how do you get it back? What gets you back in the saddle?
Oh, geez. I mean, a lot. I mean, the main fuel is that I do think this is a story that needs to be told. So, like, I think that it will really inspire some meaningful conversations, and so that's my biggest fuel. I think it will provide conversation and reflection. But when I've gotten stuck along the way, I mean, I've reached out to different resources. I have done writing groups. I've done online classes. So, I mean, you just keep finding something to push you forward. And right, I thought I was at the finish line. I did write the end of the book, and I sent out query letters to 50 different literary agents, and I did not hear back. Nobody quite, it didn't quite catch them yet. And so I did a writing group and got some feedback from some other people that I needed to change the point of view. So right now I'm back at it and a huge round of edits, and I'm excited about it. Like, I think I won't give up. I mean, eventually, if I have to, I'll self-publish it, but I really am going to keep trying to do it with an agent in a more traditional format. But I mean, I think you just keep using your resources, just see how you can pivot. Like, what can you do a little different that can keep you moving forward? And that's how I'm approaching this, and I'll get there.
And you keep going back to your why, because
Yes.
you find it is important to get it out there.
Yeah, it's a story
Yeah.
worth telling for sure.
Yeah. And I believe Dr. Seuss was rejected by every single publisher for
Oh
years
yeah.
and years and years.
There's
And I,
so many stories like that
that's
keep me
right.
going for sure.
Beautiful. Because
One of my
that's
favorite
important.
authors, the author of Hello Beautiful, Anne Napolitano. I don't know how to say her last name, but I mean, her first book was a total flop. It got published, and now it's just been republished. And I mean, you just can't give up for sure, especially with writing. It's a tough industry, but it's true with everything, with any goal. There's going to be setbacks. There's going to be hurdles.
Yeah. And with anything that has meaning and purpose, it is worth it. And it isn't just because we feel we're meant to do it, doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It's sometimes we're meant to understand that we are here to learn tenacity, perhaps, and we've got to work through all the challenges because
Oh my
there's going
gosh.
to be challenges.
That's so it, because as you know me, Meg, I love to start things. I think it's really fun to like start something new, and like I love starting things, but this is definitely my life lesson in, getting to the finish line too.
Which is like having kids, really. It's another extension of this is another baby for you. You're not going to give up on it.
Right, that's for sure.
Yeah. And you are the one that told me years ago to start a podcast. Uh,
Yeah,
that's you. Remember, you
I do.
actually sent me information so I could get going on a podcast, and I was going to start my own podcast. But Susie is the one that got that train rolling within me. So thank you so much for that. That was you.
Well, I'm so glad that you took my advice, Meg, because I think you're reaching people, and that's the best part.
And it wasn't just your advice; it was your encouragement. You
Yes,
you are
yes.
a beautiful encourager, which is so lovely.
I like to be a cheerleader for my friends, that's for sure.
Yeah. So, in what ways has your, and we talked about this a little before, but when you look at how you communicate, because some of the ways you live are different than how other people live. So, when you look at how you have become more connected to yourself and living with that beautiful piece of living a life that is important to me, that's part of your purpose, right? And a life that's important to you. How has that shifted your relationships and how you communicate with people outside of your family?
Um, I I don't know for sure. I mean, I think that there's like a easier that it's easier to talk to people because I'm more certain about who I am. I mean, so I don't feel this, we're in a new place. We've moved here, last fall, and I haven't made a ton of friends, but I'm okay with it. The friends that I am investing in, I'm so grateful for and really enjoy, but I don't feel this pressure to make a bunch of friends or go out there and do all this stuff. But I don't know exactly. I guess it's just communicating with more clarity and authenticity. I mean, and that's what I always wanted. I mean, I remember, reading or listening to Brene Brown talk about being authentic, and I was like, yes, that's what I want to be. But I didn't know what that meant until I got clear with who I was and what was important to me. So I feel like there's less pressure too to just communicate more clearly, more directly. I don't feel like I have to beat around the bush too much anymore. Like I can just say it like it is.
And you do that so beautifully because when someone has a purpose and a drive and they now are moving forward with whatever that goal is, we can do it multiple ways. And we can do it with the exclusion of caring about other people. We can become a little bit tyrannical or a little bit like a monster when we are so goal driven. So having a purpose doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to be kind. And you do both. You live very purposefully and you're also very kind. And that is doable, listeners. We really want to remind ourselves because kindness helps our physical body just as much as it helps the rest of the world.
For sure. And I think that, when you feel when I mean I feel like I'm in a good place and I want other people to be in a good place. And so you want to be as kind and you want to help, not necessarily help them, but kind of just share that it's possible. I mean, I have this yoga teacher that very loudly in class yells, "It's up to you to create the best life ever." And I want like everybody to have somebody yelling that in their ear, that it is up to each of us to create the best life ever. Why not? Why have anything but the best? But I never thought of that, till I kind of started on this journey. I didn't, really think, oh, wait, I can create the best life ever? Well, sure, why not?
Why not? And so, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners today? A nugget or a takeaway or something that we haven't talked about?
Just find the pause. That is like the thing I always come back to. It's just to find the pause in life. There's so much momentum.
And it's not a waste of time, it's a necessity.
Right.
Yeah.
Then you'll take a better step forward for sure, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Meg. This was fun.
When you have your book ready for purchase, I would love to have you share that with me and I will share it with the listeners because a lot of people are going to want to read it. And also your poetry book because
Yes, and
you're a
my
really beautiful writer.
thank you. And my blog is still up at susiesteiner.me. And so there is a blog post about the book that gives a little more information, though it's not published yet, but it's really an ask out there for anybody who knows a literary agent that might be interested.
Oh,
But
that's great.
I will be continuing to post on my blog, so that's a good place to go.
I love that you just said that. Say that again, because remember that saying, ask and is given. We
Right.
don't ever get anything if we don't ask.
I know. And I had some people in the writing world be like, you have to have a blog post about your book saying you're looking for a literary agent. So put it out there. And I did. And so people can go check it out, susiesteiner.me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Meg.
Oh, thank you. And listeners, thank you so much for being here. It is always so appreciated. And I continue to be humbled and honored. So thank you. And we'll see you next week. Hey, listeners, thank you so much for being part of the Soul Speak world. I really appreciate that. And if you're willing, and if you find this of value, would you please follow on any of the platforms you're listening to, whether that's Apple or Spotify or Google or any of the platforms. And of course, I love the ratings if you find this valuable. You can also follow me on YouTube and like and share. And all of that really makes a difference. Appreciate your participation. And of course, I really appreciate you being part of this world.